The sky above Valara Prime burned orange and red as the Ravager ships tore through the atmosphere. Governor Thelvara stood at the command center window, her 4 insectoid arms trembling as she watched another city disappear in flames. The screams of her people echoed through the communication channels, each one a knife to her heart. "How long until the Coalition fleet arrives?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Her military advisor, a smaller Velaran with dulled wings, lowered his head. They said no fleet can reach us in time, Governor. The vote was denied. We are alone." Thelvara felt something break inside her chest. Alone. The word hung in the air like poison. For 3 days they had sent distress calls across the galaxy. For 3 days the Galactic Coalition had debated and argued while her world died. The bureaucrats wanted proof of intent. They wanted authorization forms. They wanted guarantees that helping Valara would not provoke the Ravagers into attacking Coalition worlds. Meanwhile, War Master Krell's forces had killed 300,000 Valarans. The command center shook as another bombardment hit the northern districts. Thelvara watched the holographic display as red markers spread across the map like a disease. Her people were fleeing underground, crowding into shelters that were never meant to hold so many. The air recyclers were failing. Food supplies would last maybe a week. It did not matter. Krell would not give them a week. "Prepare the final broadcast," Thelvara said quietly. "The people deserve to hear the truth from me before the end comes." Outside, the third moon rose over the burning capital. Thelvara had always found that moon beautiful. Her mother used to tell her stories beneath its light. Now it would be the last moon she ever saw. The Ravager ground forces had already landed in the eastern continent. Reports came in of entire villages wiped out, not for resources or territory, but for sport. The Ravagers enjoyed killing. They made art from suffering. Thelvara had seen the footage before she ordered it classified. Her people did not need to see what awaited them. "Governor," the communications officer called out, "the Ravager fleet is moving into bombardment formation. They are preparing for the final assault." Thelvara nodded slowly. She had prepared a speech, something to give her people courage in their last moments. But what courage could words provide against plasma cannons and orbital strikes? What hope could she offer when the entire galaxy had abandoned them? She stepped up to the broadcast console. Her hands moved over the controls, preparing to address what remained of her world. 12 billion Valarans would hear her voice. 12 billion people who trusted her to protect them. 12 billion souls she had failed. "People of Valara," she began, her voice steady despite the terror in her heart. "I stand before you not as your governor, but as a fellow Valaran who shares your fear and your pain. The Coalition will not save us. No fleet is coming. In these final hours I want you to know, space tore open." Thelvara stopped mid-sentence, staring at the holographic display. Reality itself seemed to rip apart above the capital city. A massive wound opened in the fabric of space, bleeding blue and white energy into the darkness. The sensors screamed warnings, their readings going wild as something enormous pushed through the tear. A ship emerged. Then another. Then 10 more. They were unlike anything Thelvara had ever seen. Massive warships, their armor scarred and scorched from battles across 100 worlds. Each ship bore markings in a language she did not recognize, but the symbols looked aggressive, purposeful, fierce. Gun batteries lined their hulls like the teeth of predators. Fighter craft swarmed from their launch bays in disciplined formations. What are those?" her military advisor whispered. The communications officer frantically worked his console. "I am getting identification codes. They are human ships, Governor. But that is impossible. The human fleet was 3 systems away. They would need 3 more days to reach us. 3 days we do not have," Thelvara said, unable to look away from the display. "Yet they are here." The human fleet moved with deadly precision. They did not ask for permission to engage. They did not wait for orders from the Coalition. They simply attacked. Plasma cannons lit up the darkness as the human warships opened fire on the Ravager fleet. The Ravagers, caught completely by surprise, scrambled to respond. Their ships had been positioned for orbital bombardment, not fleet combat. The humans exploited every weakness, every gap in their formation. "They are launching drop pods," someone shouted. Thelvara watched in amazement as hundreds of small craft detached from the human ships and plummeted toward the surface. They fell like burning stars, trailing fire and thunder through the atmosphere. The Ravager ground forces, which had been advancing on the capital, suddenly found themselves under attack from above. The drop pods crashed into Ravager positions with devastating force. Armored figures emerged from the smoke and fire, moving with the fluid grace of apex predators. They carried weapons that roared and flashed in the darkness. Each human soldier moved as if they had trained for this exact battle their entire lives. The Valerans, who had been preparing to die, now watched from their shelters as human warriors fought the Ravagers in the streets of their cities. The humans did not fight like the coalition forces Thelvara had seen in training videos. They fought with a ferocity that seemed almost primal, yet every move was calculated, every shot precise. A communication request flashed on Thelvara's console. She accepted it with shaking hands. A human face appeared on the screen. It was a woman with dark hair pulled back tightly, her eyes sharp and intense. She wore a military uniform decorated with symbols that suggested high rank and hard-won victories. "Governor Thelvara," the human said. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. "I am Commander Jiwan Park of the Human Defense Fleet. We received your distress call. I apologize for the delay." "Delay?" Thelvara nearly laughed. "Commander Park, you were 3 days away. How did you—" "We took a shortcut," Jiwan said simply. "A dangerous one. We lost a frigate in the jump, and 2 of my ships have damaged slipspace drives. But we are here now, and you are not alone anymore." Tears fell from Thelvara's compound eyes. "The Coalition said no one would come." "The Coalition was wrong," Jiwan replied. "My fleet will handle the Ravager ships in orbit. My ground forces are engaging their troops on the surface. Governor, I need you to coordinate with my people. Get your civilians to safety and show my soldiers where the Ravagers are concentrated." "Yes, of course, anything." Thelvara paused. "Commander, there are so many of them." "Your ships are outnumbered 3-1. Jiwan's expression did not change. "Governor, humans have faced worse odds than this. We did not travel 3 systems and risk our lives just to run away from a fight. We came here to save your world, and that is exactly what we will do." The transmission ended. Thelvara stared at the empty screen, then back at the holographic display. The battle raged in orbit and on the ground. The humans fought with a determination that defied logic, throwing themselves against the Ravagers with controlled fury. In the streets below the command center, Thelvara could hear weapons fire. She could hear the distinctive sound of human war cries mixing with Ravager screams. The tide of the battle was shifting. For the first time in days, Thelvara allowed herself to feel something other than despair. Hope. Captain Minho Kim felt the drop pod shake violently as it cut through the atmosphere at terminal velocity. The heat shield glowed white-hot and the G-forces pressed him deep into his seat. Around him, 20 other soldiers sat strapped in, their faces hidden behind combat helmets but their body language revealing no fear. They had done this 100 times before. 30 seconds to impact. Someone called over the radio. Minho checked his rifle one last time. The weapon was loaded, the safety off, the targeting system linked to his helmet display. Everything was ready. He was ready. His soldiers were ready. The drop pod slammed into the ground with bone-crushing force. The harnesses released automatically and the side panels exploded outward. Minho was moving before the smoke cleared, his rifle up and scanning for targets. They had landed in what used to be a marketplace. Now it was a battlefield. Ravager soldiers moved between the burning stalls, their reptilian forms unmistakable even through the smoke. They were executing Velaran civilians who had been too slow to reach the shelters. Minho did not hesitate. His rifle barked 3 times and 3 Ravagers fell. His soldiers spread out in perfect formation, each one covering a sector, each one firing with deadly accuracy. The Ravagers, who had been enjoying their massacre, suddenly found themselves fighting for their lives. Contact left. Sergeant Deho Song's deep voice rumbled over the radio. The big man carried a heavy machine gun like it weighed nothing. He opened fire and the weapon roared like thunder. Ravagers fell in groups, their armor no match for the human weapons. "Advance by teams," Mio ordered. "Clear every building. Save every civilian you can find." The battle raged through the marketplace and into the streets beyond. The Ravagers fought back hard. They were experienced killers, armed with plasma weapons and protected by energy shields. But the humans moved with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. When one soldier needed to reload, another was already covering them. When a Ravager tried to flank, a human was already there waiting. High above the battlefield, Lieutenant Samin Choi danced her fighter through the sky. She had always loved flying, even as a child. The sensation of speed, the freedom of movement, the pure joy of defying gravity. But this was not a joyride. This was war. Razor 3, you have 2 bandits on your 6, her wingman called. Summon rolled her fighter into a tight spiral, the G-forces making her vision narrow. The Ravager interceptors followed, their plasma cannons firing streams of superheated energy. She counted the shots, calculated their reload time, and then flipped her fighter in a maneuver that would have killed a less experienced pilot. The Ravagers overshot her position. Now they were in front of her. Her cannons fired and one Ravager exploded into debris. The second tried to escape, but Soman was faster. Her missiles locked on and streaked away from her fighter. The Ravager pilot tried to evade, but it was too late. The explosion lit up the sky. Splash 2, Soman reported calmly, though her heart was racing. Razor Flight, regroup and prepare for another pass. On the human flagship, Commander Jiwan Park watched the battle unfold on multiple screens. Every ship, every soldier, every fighter was represented by a marker on her tactical display. She could see where her forces were winning and where they were struggling. The Ravager fleet outnumbered her 3-1, but numbers were not everything. Ensign Nam, open a channel to all Ravager ships, Jiwan ordered. A young woman at the communications console nodded. Ensign Hyejin Nam had a gift for languages and an empathy that made her invaluable in negotiations. Her fingers flew over the controls, and within seconds she had breached the Ravager communication network. Channel open, Commander. Jiwan leaned forward. Ravager fleet, this is Commander Jiwan Park of the Human Defense Fleet. You have one chance to surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. If you refuse, we will destroy every one of your ships. The response was immediate and predictable. Laughter, insults, threats. They are not taking us seriously. Commander, Hyejin said quietly. Then we will teach them to, Jiwan replied. All ships target the Ravager cruiser designated Alpha 7. Fire on my mark. 3 human destroyers focused their weapons on a single Ravager cruiser. The concentrated fire overwhelmed the cruiser's shields in seconds. The ship broke apart, its reactor exploding in a flash of white light. The laughter on the Ravager channel stopped. I am broadcasting footage of the battle to every Ravager ship, Hyejin reported. They can see what happened to Alpha 7. Good, Jiwan said. Let them see what happens when they refuse to surrender. On the surface, Dr. Yuna Lee worked in a hastily established field hospital. She was young for a combat medic, barely out of medical school when she joined the fleet. But she had seen more trauma in 2 years than most doctors saw in their entire careers. A Velaran child lay on the operating table in front of her, injured by shrapnel from a collapsed building. Yuna worked quickly, her hands steady despite the sounds of battle outside. The Velaran physiology was different from human anatomy, but she had studied the files during the journey to Valara. She knew where the major blood vessels were, how the respiratory system worked, how to stop the bleeding. Hang on, little one, she whispered. You are going to be fine. The surgery took 20 minutes. When she was done, the child was stable and sleeping peacefully. A Velaran medic who had been watching with wide eyes approached hesitantly. How did you know what to do? The Velaran asked. You are not trained in our medicine. Yuna wiped the blood from her hands. I read the medical files we have on your species. I studied during the slipspace jump. You learned our entire anatomy in 3 hours. I had to, Yuna said simply. People need help, so I learned how to help them. That is what we do. The Velaran medic stared at her with something close to awe. Your people are remarkable, Yuna smiled tiredly. We are just doing our job. Now come on. There are more patients waiting. Captain Minho and his soldiers pushed deeper into the city. They had saved hundreds of Velaran civilians, evacuating them to the shelters while killing any Ravagers they encountered. But the cost was high. Minho had already lost 5 soldiers, 5 people under his command who would never go home. He found a group of Valarans huddled in a basement too terrified to move. They stared at him with their compound eyes, clicking their mandibles in fear. Minho removed his helmet so they could see his face. It is okay, he said gently. We are here to help. My soldiers will take you to safety. One of the Valarans, an elderly individual with faded wing casings, stepped forward. Why did you come? No one else answered our calls. Minho looked at the old Velaran for a long moment. Because someone has to, he said finally. Because it is the right thing to do. Because we refuse to live in a galaxy where innocent people die while others do nothing. The Velaran reached out with a trembling claw and touched Minho's armored chest. Thank you. Thank you for not letting us die alone. Minho felt something tighten in his throat. He put his helmet back on and keyed his radio. Daeho, get these civilians to the evacuation point. Stay with them until they are safe. Understood, Captain. As Sergeant Daeho led the Valerans away, Minho turned back toward the sound of gunfire. The battle was not over. Not even close. War Master Krell still commanded the Ravager flagship, and that ship carried a weapon that could crack a planet in half. High in orbit, aboard his massive dreadnought, Krell watched the battle with growing fury. How are these humans doing this? They were supposed to be traitors and diplomats, soft creatures who avoided conflict. Yet here they were, tearing through his fleet like a knife through flesh. Prepare the bombardment cannon, Krell ordered. If I cannot conquer this world, I will destroy it. Let the humans save ashes and dust. His officers scrambled to obey. The cannon mounted along the spine of the dreadnought began to power up. It would take 5 minutes to reach full charge. Then one shot would end this battle forever. On the human flagship, alarms screamed as sensors detected the energy buildup. Commander, Hyejin shouted, the Ravager flagship is powering up a massive weapon. Analyzing, it is a planetary bombardment cannon. Ji-won felt ice run through her veins. She had seen weapons like that before. One shot could trigger earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis. Millions would die instantly. Billions more would die slowly as the planet tore itself apart. She had only one choice. All ships, new priority target, Ji-won said. We are taking down that flagship. Commander Ji-won Park stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through the calculations. The Ravager flagship was enormous, protected by shields that could withstand a sustained assault from her entire fleet. Even if she focused all her firepower on that single ship, it would take at least 10 minutes to breach the shields and damage the hull. The bombardment cannon would fire in 5. There was only one option that could work in time. Ensign Nam, get me Captain Minho, Ji-won ordered. Hyejin's fingers flew over her console. Within seconds, Minho's face appeared on the screen. His armor was scorched and dented, and blood streaked his face, but his eyes were sharp and alert. Commander, Minho, I need you and your best soldiers for a boarding action, Ji-won said. The Ravager flagship has a weapon that will destroy this planet. We have to disable it from the inside. Minho did not hesitate. Send me the coordinates. How long do we have? 4 minutes until they can fire. Maybe less. Then we better move fast. Minho switched channels. All units, this is Captain Minho. I need volunteers for a suicide mission. We are boarding the Ravager flagship to stop a planet-killer weapon. Anyone who comes with me might not come back. The response was immediate. Every soldier in Minho's company volunteered. He selected 20 of his best, including Sergeant Daeho and a young private named Jinho Bai, who had proven himself brave beyond his years during the street fighting. Private Jinho was terrified, but he was not going to let his fear control him. He had watched his captain save Valaran civilians without hesitation. He had seen human soldiers throw themselves in front of plasma fire to protect others. If they could be that brave, so could he. The boarding craft launched from the human carrier, racing toward the Ravager flagship. The craft was small and fast, designed to slip through defensive fire and latch onto enemy hulls. Plasma bolts streaked past them, and Jinho felt his stomach twist with each near miss. 30 seconds to contact, the pilot shouted. The craft slammed into the Ravager flagship's hull. Magnetic clamps locked them in place, and cutting torches began burning through the armor plating. Minho stood at the breach point, his rifle ready. Remember the plan, he said calmly. Fast and violent. We cut through to the cannon control room. Disable the weapon and extract. Stay together. Watch your sectors. Do not die. The hull plating fell away with a shower of sparks. Beyond it was a corridor filled with Ravager soldiers who had been rushing to repel the boarders. Minho was through the breach before the metal stopped glowing. His rifle fired in controlled bursts and Ravagers fell. The battle inside the flagship was chaos. The corridors were narrow, forcing both sides into close combat. Jinho found himself face to face with a massive Ravager warrior. The alien swung a blade at his head. Jinho ducked, his training taking over, and fired 3 shots center mass. The Ravager collapsed. Good kill, Jinho. Daeho called over the radio. Keep moving. They fought through corridor after corridor. The Ravagers knew their ship was being boarded and threw everything they had at the humans. But Minho's team moved with precision, covering each other's movements, never giving the enemy a chance to coordinate a proper defense. Down in the medical bay on the surface, Dr. Yuna Lee received word of the boarding action. She immediately began preparing for casualties. If anyone made it back alive, they would need immediate medical attention. An elderly Veleron approached her, moving slowly on aged legs. It was Elder Sivrith, a historian who had lived through 3 wars. The old Veleran carried a data tablet covered in ancient script. "Dr. Lee," Sivrith said in careful English, "there is something you must know about your people." Yuna looked up from her medical supplies. "What do you mean?" Sivrith activated the tablet and holographic images appeared. They showed human ships, but the designs were centuries old. 500 years ago, our world was attacked by raiders. We sent distress calls just as we did this time. And humans came. They saved us, asked for nothing in return, and then left. Before they departed, their commander made a promise. She said that if we ever needed help again, humans would come. Yuna stared at the images. "I never knew about this." "Few do," Sivrith said. "It became a legend among my people. The story of the Sky Warriors who appeared when we needed them most. Many believed it was just a myth, but I always knew it was real. And today you proved me right. Humans keep their promises, even promises made 500 years ago." Tears formed in Yuna's eyes, but she blinked them away. There would be time for emotion later. Right now, people needed her help. On the Ravager flagship, Minho's team reached the cannon control room. The massive chamber was filled with machinery and power conduits. At the center stood War Master Krell himself, surrounded by elite guards. "Humans," Krell said, his voice a deep rumble. "You should have stayed away. This galaxy belongs to the strong. Your mercy makes you weak." "Our mercy makes us strong," Minho replied. He raised his rifle. "Power down the cannon," Krell laughed. "The cannon is already charged. In 60 seconds it will fire." "You cannot stop it. Watch me." The firefight was brutal. Krell's elite guards were the best warriors the Ravagers had, equipped with advanced shields and weapons. But the humans fought with a desperate fury, knowing that millions of lives depended on them. Deho's heavy machine gun tore through the guards' shields. Jinho took a plasma bolt to the shoulder but kept fighting, his rifle never stopping. Minho fought his way to the control console. He did not know how to operate Ravager technology, but he knew how to destroy it. He planted explosives on the cannon's power conduits, setting the timer for 30 seconds. "All personnel, evacuate now," he shouted. His soldiers began falling back toward the breach point, but as Minho turned to follow them, a massive claw grabbed his leg. Krell, wounded but still alive, pulled Minho down. "If I die, you die with me, human." Minho looked at the timer on the explosives. 15 seconds. He could not break free in time. He could not reach the breach point. He looked up and saw Deho running back toward him. "No!" "Deho, get out of here." Deho ignored the order. The big man grabbed Krell and threw the alien warlord across the room with raw strength. Then he hauled Minho to his feet. "Run, Captain," they ran. The explosives detonated just as they reached the corridor. The blast wave caught them both, throwing them like rag dolls. Minho felt metal tear through his side. Pain exploded through his body. He could not breathe, could not see, could not move. Then hands were grabbing him, dragging him through the corridors. He heard voices shouting, heard the sound of weapons fire, heard the roar of the boarding craft's engines. Someone was screaming. It took him a moment to realize the screams were his own. The boarding craft pulled away from the Ravager flagship, just as secondary explosions began tearing through the massive ship. The bombardment cannon exploded, the blast ripping the flagship in half. Debris spread across orbit like deadly confetti. In the boarding craft, Jinho held pressure on Minho's wound while tears streamed down his face. "Stay with us, Captain. Please stay with us." Deho lay nearby, unconscious but alive. Both men were covered in blood, their armor shredded, but they were alive. On the human flagship, Commander Jiwan watched the Ravager flagship break apart. The death of Krell's command ship broke the Ravager fleet's will to fight. Ships began powering down their weapons. Some tried to flee but were quickly surrounded by human fighters. "Ensign Nam, broadcast a message to all Ravager ships," Jiwan ordered. "Tell them they have one last chance to surrender. Anyone who continues fighting will be destroyed." This time the Ravagers listened. One by one, the enemy ships lowered their shields and surrendered. The battle for Valara was over, but the cost had been terrible. Dr. Yuna Lee worked for 18 hours straight, performing surgery after surgery. She saved Captain Minho's life, though he would carry scars forever. She repaired Sergeant Deho's broken bones and burned skin. She held the hands of dying soldiers and whispered words of comfort. Private Jinho sat outside the medical bay, still wearing his blood-stained armor. He was crying and he did not care who saw. He had killed his first enemy. He had saved his captain's life. He had watched friends die. War was nothing like the training simulations. A small Valaran child, one of the refugees Daiho had saved earlier, approached Jinho shyly. The child held out a flower, one of the few living things that had survived the battle. "Thank you for saving us," the child whispered. Jinho took the flower with trembling hands. He looked at this innocent being, this life that would continue because humans had refused to turn away. Maybe, he thought, maybe that was what made it all worth it. The wreckage of the Ravager flagship tumbled through space, breaking into smaller pieces with each passing hour. Inside one of those pieces, trapped in a twisted section of corridor, Captain Minho Kim fought to stay conscious. His combat suit's medical systems pumped drugs into his bloodstream, keeping him alive but unable to move. Metal pinned his legs. Blood pooled beneath him. Through the cracked visor of his helmet he could see stars. It was beautiful. He had always loved space, even as a child growing up on Earth. The endless darkness, the cold silence, the sense of infinite possibility. Now that same space would be his tomb. "All units, this is Park." Commander Jiwan's voice crackled over the radio. "I need immediate location on Captain Minho. His suit beacon is active but weak." "We have his position, Commander," someone responded. "He is in the debris field from the flagship. That section is structurally unstable. It could break apart any moment." "Then we better hurry," said a new voice, Dr. Yuna Lee. "Prep a rescue shuttle. I am going after him." Minho tried to speak, tried to tell them not to risk more lives for him, but his throat would not work. The radio in his helmet crackled with static. The rescue shuttle launched from the human carrier, piloted by Lieutenant Soman. The young pilot had fought brilliantly during the battle, destroying 7 enemy fighters and saving countless lives. Now she flew with the same skill and determination, navigating through the deadly debris field. "I see the section," Soman reported. "It is breaking apart, but I can get close enough for a boarding action." Dr. Yuna stood in the back of the shuttle, surrounded by medical equipment and a team of combat engineers. She had performed miracles in the field hospital, saving both human and Velaran lives. Now she would save one more. The shuttle latched onto the drifting wreckage. The engineers cut through the twisted metal with plasma torches while Yuna prepared her medical gear. Every second counted. The wreckage groaned and shifted, threatening to tear itself apart. Yuna found Minho in the darkness, pinned and bleeding. She injected him with advanced clotting agents and pain suppressors, then worked with the engineers to free his crushed legs. The metal had damaged tissue and bone, but nothing she could not fix if they got him to the medical bay in time. "Got him," one of the engineers shouted. "Let's move." They carried Minho back to the shuttle just as the wreckage finally broke apart. Salman fired the engines at full thrust, racing away from the expanding debris cloud. Behind them, the section where Minho had been trapped crumbled into 1,000 pieces. On the human flagship, Commander Jiwan watched the rescue shuttle dock with quiet relief. She had already lost 37 soldiers in this battle. She would not lose Minho too, but the cost of victory weighed heavily on her shoulders. Down on Valara's surface, the battle was over, but the suffering continued. Sergeant Daiho walked through the ruins of the marketplace where they had first landed. Bodies lay everywhere, both Ravager and Velaran. Buildings stood as blackened skeletons. The air smelled of smoke and death. He found a group of Valaran children huddled in what remained of a schoolhouse. They were alive, protected by the bodies of their teachers who had sacrificed themselves. Daiho removed his helmet and knelt beside them. "It is okay now," he said gently. "The bad people are gone. You are safe." One of the children, a small Velaran with bright green eyes, looked up at him. "Where are our parents?" Daiho felt his throat tighten. He did not know how to answer that question. Some of these children's parents were probably dead. Others might be in shelters, waiting desperately for news of their young ones. Either way, these children had seen horrors no child should ever witness. "We will help you find them," Daiho said. "I promise." He spent the next hours helping evacuate the orphaned children to safety. Some clung to him as he carried them, their small claws digging into his armor. Others walked silently, their eyes hollow with trauma. Daiho, the massive soldier who carried a machine gun like a toy, wept openly as he worked. Later, sitting alone in the ruins, Daiho thought about his own childhood. He had grown up in a peaceful farming village on Earth. He had never known war until he joined the military. Now war was all he knew. But if his fighting could protect children like these, if his strength could shield the innocent, then maybe it was worth it. News of the battle spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. A human journalist named Borahan had embedded with the fleet, documenting everything. Her footage showed the desperate fight on the surface, the sacrifice of the boarding team, and the final moments when the Ravager fleet surrendered. Trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds watched the humans fight. They saw soldiers throwing themselves in front of plasma fire to protect Valaran civilians. They saw medics working in the streets while bombs fell around them. They saw warriors weeping for the innocent dead. The galaxy had thought humans were traitors and diplomats. Now they knew the truth. Humans were warriors. But they were warriors who fought for others, not for conquest. Warriors who mourned the deaths of their enemies. Warriors who would cross the galaxy to save strangers. The Galactic Coalition, which had refused to help Valara, now faced a crisis. Public opinion had turned sharply against them. Millions demanded to know why the Coalition had abandoned the Valarans while humans, acting without authorization, had saved them. Admiral Tay Park arrived at Valara 3 days after the battle. She commanded a massive Coalition fleet, including ships from a dozen different species. She was Commander Jiwan's former mentor, a by-the-book officer who had taught Jiwan everything she knew about tactics and strategy. Admiral Tay walked through the human flagship with barely controlled fury. She found Jiwan in the command center, reviewing casualty reports. "Commander Park," Admiral Tay said formally, "you violated direct orders. You performed an unauthorized slipspace jump that could have killed everyone on your ships. You engaged an enemy fleet without Coalition approval. You started a battle that could have escalated into a sector-wide war." Jiwan stood and met her mentor's eyes. "Yes, Admiral. I did all of those things. You understand that I should court-martial you, that I should strip you of your command and end your career." "Yes, Admiral." Admiral Tay was silent for a long moment. Then, to Jiwan's surprise, the older woman smiled. "But I will not. Because what you did was right. You saved 12 billion lives. You showed the galaxy what it means to be human. You reminded all of us why we serve." She pulled out a datapad and handed it to Jiwan. "The Coalition Council has voted. The charges against you are dismissed. Instead, you are being promoted to Admiral. And humanity is being granted a permanent seat on the Coalition Security Council." Jiwan stared at the pad in shock. "What? Why?" "Because the galaxy watched your soldiers die to protect strangers," Admiral Tay said quietly. "Because they saw humans keep a promise made 500 years ago. Because they realized that when innocent people cry for help, humans answer. Every species in the Coalition wants to know that if their world is threatened, someone will come to help. Now they know humans will come. On the planet's surface, a ceremony was being held. Governor Thelvara stood before a crowd of thousands, both Valaran and human. Behind her stood statues being unveiled, carved from native stone. The statues showed human soldiers in combat armor, larger than life, looking skyward. "These warriors fell from the heavens when we had lost all hope," Thelvara said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "They did not know us. We could offer them nothing. Yet they came and they fought, and some of them died to save us. Today we declare these humans children of the sacred promise. They are our eternal friends, our protectors, our family." Priest Tekmora, the highest religious authority on Valara, came forward carrying an ancient text. 500 years ago, humans came to our world when we were in darkness. They saved us and asked for nothing. They left us with only a promise: if we ever needed help again, they would return. Today, that promise was kept. In the hospital, Captain Minho woke from surgery. Dr. Yuna sat beside his bed reading a medical journal. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair falling out of its bun. "Did we win?" Minho asked, his voice rough. Yuna smiled. "Yes, we won. Valara is safe. The Ravagers surrendered." "Good." Minho closed his eyes. "How many did we lose?" 37 soldiers. 12 pilots. 5 engineers. Yuna's voice broke slightly. "I tried to save them all." "I know you did." Minho reached out and took her hand. "Thank you for coming after me." Private Jinho received a medal for valor from Governor Thelvara herself. The young soldier who had been terrified during his first battle now stood tall. The child who had given him a flower stood beside the governor, watching with wide eyes. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Valara Prime. The planet still bore the scars of war, but life was returning. Valarans worked alongside humans to rebuild homes, schools, and hospitals. Children played in the streets again, their laughter a sound that many had thought they would never hear. In the human fleet's command center, Admiral Jiwan Park stood before a holographic display showing the entire sector. Red markers indicated worlds in distress. Yellow markers showed potential threats. Green markers represented safe zones. There were far too many red markers. Another distress call, Ensign Hyejin reported. A mining colony on the edge of the Tertian cluster. They are under attack by raiders. Jiwan studied the display. Her fleet was still damaged from the battle. 2 ships were operating at reduced capacity. Her soldiers were exhausted. By every regulation in the Coalition military handbook, she should return to Earth for repairs and rest. How long until the Coalition can respond? Jiwan asked. They estimate 4 days, Admiral. 4 days. Jiwan had heard that before. 4 days meant the colony would be dead before help arrived. Ensign, call all senior officers to the command center. I want a vote. Within minutes, the command center was filled with officers. Captain Minho stood on crutches, his legs still healing from the surgery. Lieutenant Soman leaned against a console, her arm in a sling from a crash landing. Dr. Yuna looked like she might fall asleep standing up. Sergeant Deho's face was covered in burn scars that were slowly fading. We have received another distress call, Jiwan said. A colony needs help that will not arrive in time. Our fleet is damaged. Our people are tired. We have every right to return home. But if we do, those colonists will die. She looked around the room at her officers. This is not an order. I am asking for a vote. Should we go home or should we answer the call? Captain Minho raised his hand first. I vote we go. That is what we do. Agreed, Dr. Yuna said quietly. People need help. We can rest later. One by one, every officer voted to continue, not because they were ordered to, not because they would be rewarded, but because somewhere in the galaxy innocent people were crying for help, and humans did not ignore such cries. Then we go, Jiwan said. Prepare the fleet for departure. On Valara's surface, farewell ceremonies were being held across the planet. Governor Thelvara stood with Elder Sivrith, watching human soldiers board their transports. Some of those soldiers would never leave Valara. They rested now in a memorial garden, their names carved in stone alongside Velaran warriors. They are leaving, Thelvara said sadly. I wish they could stay. They must go, Sivrith replied, because somewhere else someone needs them. That is the burden humans have chosen to carry. They are the ones who answer when others will not. Sergeant Deho knelt in the memorial garden, placing flowers on the graves of his fallen comrades. Beside him stood a young Valaran named Kiva, one of the orphans he had saved during the battle. In the weeks since, Kiva had barely left Deho's side. You are leaving, Kiva said, not quite a question. Yes, Deho replied, but I will come back. I promise. Everyone makes promises. Not everyone keeps them. Deho looked at the small Valaran child who had lost everything. Humans keep their promises. 500 years ago, we promised to return if Valara needed us. We came back. I promise I will return for you, and that is a promise I will keep. He pulled out a datapad and showed Kiva the adoption papers he had filed. I talked to your governor. She agreed to let me become your guardian. When my tour of duty ends, I will come back and take you to Earth. You will have a home and you will have a family. Kiva stared at the papers, then threw his small arms around Deho's neck and cried. The massive soldier held the child gently, his own eyes wet with tears. Lieutenant Samin walked through her fighter squadron's hangar one last time. She had lost 3 pilots in the battle. Their empty flight suits hung in a memorial case, their names etched on a plaque. She saluted them, knowing they had died as heroes. A group of young Velaran pilots approached her. They wore training flight suits and carried helmets modeled after human designs. Lieutenant Choi, one of them said, we wanted to thank you. You taught us that we could defend ourselves. That we did not have to be helpless, Soman smiled. You were never helpless. You just needed someone to show you how to fight. Keep training. Keep learning. Next time raiders come to your world, you will be ready. She had spent the past 3 weeks training the 1st Valaran fighter squadron. They would never be as skilled as human pilots, their physiology was too different, but they did not need to be the best. They just needed to be good enough to protect their home. In the fleet hospital, Private Jinho helped load the last medical supplies. He moved carefully, his shoulder still healing from the plasma burn. Dr. Yuna worked beside him, checking inventory lists. "Are you scared?" Jinho asked quietly. "About the next battle?" Yuna paused. "Yes, I'm always scared. But being scared does not mean we should not go. It means we understand the risks and choose to go anyway." "I killed people during the battle," Jinho said. "I thought it would feel different. Important somehow. But it just felt necessary." "That is because you are a good person," Yuna replied. "Killing should never feel good. It should feel necessary at best and tragic at worst. The day killing becomes easy is the day you lose your humanity." Jinho nodded slowly. He would remember those words. The human fleet prepared to depart. Ships aligned in formation, their hulls still showing scorch marks from battle. Fighter squadrons performed final checks. Soldiers said goodbye to Velaran friends they had made. Admiral Jiwan stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching Valara shrink on the view screen. Behind her, Ensign Hyejin worked at her station, preparing the jump coordinates for their next destination. "Admiral," Hyejin said, "I have been monitoring galactic communications. Our actions at Valara have changed things. 7 different species have requested human military advisors. 15 worlds have asked for defense treaties. The entire galaxy is talking about us." "Let them talk," Jiwan said. "We are not doing this for fame or treaties. We are doing this because it is right." "But Admiral, do you not see what this means? We could leverage this into trade agreements, territory, resources. We could become one of the most powerful species in the galaxy." Jiwan turned to look at her young communications officer. "Hyejin, 500 years ago humans saved Valara and asked for nothing in return. Today we did the same thing. That is not weakness. That is strength. The moment we start demanding payment for doing the right thing is the moment we lose what makes us human." She looked back at the view screen. "Besides, we already have the only reward that matters. We have the knowledge that we made a difference. We saved lives. We kept a promise. That is worth more than all the territory and resources in the galaxy." The fleet jumped to slipspace, leaving Valara behind. But they were not forgotten. The statues in the capital square would stand for generations. The names carved in the memorial garden would be remembered. Children would grow up hearing stories of the humans who fell from the heavens. And across the galaxy, on worlds facing darkness, people looked to the stars with new hope. On a mining colony in the Tertian cluster, colonists huddled in bunkers as raiders attacked. They had sent distress calls, but hope was fading. The raiders would break through soon. Then the governor's communication console lit up with an incoming message. "Mining Colony Tertia 7. This is Admiral Jiwan Park of the Human Defense Fleet. We received your distress call. Hold your position. We are coming." In the bunker, the governor stared at the message in disbelief. Then he began to cry. They were not alone. Someone was coming. Someone always came. On Earth, in the human military headquarters, generals and admirals gathered to watch live feeds from the fleet. They saw damaged ships jumping into hostile territory. They saw exhausted soldiers preparing for another battle. They saw humans who had every right to rest choosing instead to fight. "Should we order them to return?" one general asked. The supreme commander, an elderly woman who had served in a dozen wars, shook her head. "No, let them go. This is what we are. This is what we have always been. When others are in danger, we answer the call. Not because we want to conquer. Not because we seek glory, but because we refuse to live in a galaxy where innocent people die while we do nothing." She looked at the other commanders. "Begin recruitment campaigns. Start building more ships. Train more soldiers. Because every world we save will mean 10 more worlds asking for help. Humanity's role in this galaxy has changed. We are not just explorers or traders anymore. We are protectors. We are the ones who come when hope is lost." On Valara Prime, as night fell over the rebuilt capital, Governor Thelvara stood before the statues of human warriors. She placed flowers at their base and whispered a prayer in the ancient Velaran language. "Thank you for keeping the promise. Thank you for not letting us die alone. And thank you for showing us that even in the darkest night, heroes exist." Far above, stars shone in the darkness. Somewhere among those stars, the human fleet was jumping toward another battle. More humans would be wounded. Some would die. But they would go anyway because that was what humans did. They kept their promises. They protected the innocent. They fell from the heavens when no one else would come.